Well, shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for TLV Talk. I'm Rabbi Mark Greenberg from the Tree of Life Bible Society.
And I'm Joseph Greenberg, and we are excited to have you back here for another round of TLV Talk. This week's Torah portion being Parshat Emor, which means what, Pop?
Speak.
Okay.
Or say, depending upon. And what God is saying, he's actually saying to Moses, listen, would you do me a favor? Speak to Aaron and his sons. In other words, to all the Kohanim. And so where we're rolling into is from the morality laws that you saw in Leviticus 19 and 20 last week into some additional, not guidelines, but literal, this is the way the sons of Aaron, the real priests, are supposed to live their life, especially.
Yeah, it's interesting because it kind of, even though last week's Torah portion was Kedoshim, this week's Torah portion has as much to do, if not more, about the life of Kedoshim.
Of the life of
the priests.
The priest. Now, this is a really interesting thing for you to think about, because if all believers are considered part of the kingdom of priests, then there is a standard that must be upheld for proper holiness, proper morality. And we're not talking the kind of behavior that puts you under, that brings you into legalism, but just something for you to think about in terms of how you behave versus how you think, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I feel like it's really anchored in the verse of "Be holy as I am holy."
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
That is really kind of sort of what this whole Torah portion is really based on. Be kadosh, for I am kadosh.
Exactly, and that transcends through the Torah, transcends through the kings and the prophets and the writings, and right into New Covenant texts all over the place.
Yeah, it's really the premise for sanctification, being set apart
from
the world. Like Yeshua says, be in the world but not of it. Right?
Right. So, it's the whole thing of knowing who you are. Now here, he's telling you, I want you to be physically distinct.
Right.
And there is a physical distinction to serve in the temple itself.
Right, it's about being clean and unclean, right?
There's a lot of that.
And it's about what you can and cannot eat. It's about what sacrifices you can and cannot do, right? So it's definitely an interesting Torah portion that definitely gets in the nitty-gritty of things.
And you have to balance all of this with knowing that the temple is no longer standing. You have to balance all that with New Covenant space that knows that God isn't really concerned about how you look.
Right.
He's concerned about your heart and your heart towards Him and people.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. The difference between Old and New Covenant is this idea that it's no longer just about behavior, it's about the heart.
It is about the heart.
And it kind of transcends things, so it's even, in some ways, even more strict sometimes.
You can take a look at that, and it is, because if you try to regulate how you feel towards people, towards things, you'll find yourself having your own very distinct opinions.
Yes,
you really will. So that's what what chapters 21 and 22, we encourage you to read it, are all about.
Yeah, it's definitely tough because there are parts that are like, listen, if you've got a disease or you've got this, you can't serve as a priest and whatnot, because I am holy, right? I'm the one that sanctifies you. So, it's definitely tough as, a postmodern, believer to think about this kind of stuff.
And postmodern Jews.
Right, and this idea that, God does love you even if you do have a disease, even if you do have disfigurement. God cares about you. So it's definitely, it messes with your mind a little bit.
It really does. And what you have to come up with is to know that God has you in your own personal journey, no matter where you're at physically, no matter where you are with your own heart towards God and towards each other. Remember, love God, love each other, and we say live the Bible. So it's your journey, and No one is to judge where you are in that journey because you are where you are.
Right, and let's be honest, Yeshua clearly shows that God cares about those with diseases, those with disfigurements, those with, hereditary issues. The fact is Yeshua healed the blind, healed the sick. The fact is that was a lot of what Yeshua's ministry was all about.
And he got just castigated for it because you're not supposed to go to the Samaritans. Right. You're not supposed to go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And he actually said that, but in the middle of it, look at the woman with the issue of blood. You look at all of these things.
But it brings to the forefront the fact that if you look at the New Testament or the New Covenant and don't take into account the culture that Yeshua is already existing in, right? All this stuff is Torah based, right? You weren't supposed to touch dead bodies. You weren't supposed to be near lepers. So the fact is this is the way society was done.
Correct.
Right? This was Israeli society back then, and the fact is that is what Yeshua was all about, saying, listen, let's think about people, right? Yes, these are the laws, these are the precepts that God has put forth for society, but we can't forget the lost.
So so Yeshua is basically saying, let me put a kaleidoscope click on your thinking and vision, on the way that you see each other.
Right.
Okay?
He brings a monumental change when
it
comes to how you interact with people.
Exactly.
And it's not the only culture that does that. There are other cultures that had relational. We don't deal with people lower than us. And the fact is that kind of creeped in over the centuries.
It did, and it creeps in every society. Even American society has that.
Yeah, we have to care about the hurting. We have to care about the lost, right? It says right in the Gospels, it says, "I came to you, and you didn't clothe me, you didn't feed me." This idea that,
or the whole thing about the parable of the Good Samaritan. It took a Samaritan to take this man who was absolutely in a rough shape, used his own finances to put him up at some kind of inn and attend to his wounds.
Right.
I was talking about this with one of our folks from our community here, and would that happen today? Would that happen in America? Because our society is so vastly different. You don't have medical people coming to inns or hotels.
How often do you drive through a parking lot and there's somebody homeless there asking for money? I mean, the fact is that God says you'll always have the needy with you, the widow and the orphan.
Right.
Right? And so it's just interesting to look at Torah, right, which means instruction. And understand that God has a certain way of doing things, but also take into account the fact that Yeshua came to change the paradigm.
Yeah, and he did.
Yeah.
He changed the paradigm for the Jewish world and also for the nations as well. The nations who in that day were heathens, to bring them into the commonwealth of Israel, so they would no longer be heathens, but to bring them into and make them into godly people and a nation. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord's.
Right, and the fact is, this is stuff that is kind of complex, right? That you have to work out. And listen, I challenge you. Go talk to somebody that you don't know about some of these ideas, and you'd be shocked the kind of conversations you have.
That's right.
You know.
So, lastly, we want to hit on Leviticus 23. Very, very briefly, because all of the holidays, and these are the spring feasts and the fall feasts, are two things we want to point out. They are forever. It's a continual observance. Not one of them should be let go, according to this, wherever you are. And he actually says in here, at the place you shall celebrate.
Right, and actually Leviticus 23 is pretty much the foundation of how Messianic Judaism kind of goes about
a biblical
its lifestyle.
Jewish life.
Right. That's
Shabbat every week, and fall feasts and spring feasts. And we're right now in the middle of the spring feast, and we've just had Passover, and we're up and coming on Shavuot.
Yeah, actually, you guys should go grab, we have an e-calendar out there that has all the different holidays in it, but it also has a really cool little dial that kind of shows you, spring harvest, and it kind of gives you an idea of how these things work. But you're right, we should probably go into Leviticus 23 a little bit because it's pretty interesting.
Well, I just wanted to come into talking about Shavuot because this is the next one. You can read the rest of them. But we want to encourage you to go to a Shavuot celebration at a local Messianic congregation where both heritages are celebrated. The heritage of that you're celebrating and thanking God for the harvest that has come in the spring. And number two, thanking God that he gave the Holy Spirit to this earth, to every believer, whosoever will. So that's to get an idea.
Yeah, it's actually very important because we're in the days of the counting of the Omer.
That's right.
Which is actually commanded in this week's Torah portion.
Correct.
Just for the sake of this little part here, it says that after Passover, you're supposed to, says in verse 15, then you're to count from the morrow after the Shabbat, from the day that you brought the Omer of the wave offering, 7 complete Shabbatot. So 7 weeks.
7
right?
weeks.
And then it says until the morrow after the 7th Shabbat, you are to count 50 days. So 50 days of counting the Omer. And then it says, and then present a new grain offering to Adonai. You are to bring out of your houses 2 loaves of bread for a wave offering, made of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour. They are to be baked with chametz as first fruits to Adonai. You are to present along with bread 7 one-year-old lambs without blemish, 1 young bull, and 2 rams. They will become a burnt offering to Adonai with their meal and drink offerings. That would be a little bit difficult
to do today in a congregational sanctuary setting today. But those loaves are known as kiki loaves.
Yeah.
And they're huge.
Yeah, they're really big.
And they're heavy.
Easily 5 feet.
5 feet long.
Yeah.
At least 5 pounds. It's an enormous amount of flour. And last time I tried to have one done at a traditional Jewish bakery, they were like $30.
Yeah.
And you can make it yourself. Most people don't have an oven.
Most people don't have an oven big enough. I mean, you need like a pizza oven.
You need a commercial pizza oven in order to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
You really do.
So, the fact is that the whole idea of Shavuot is its first fruits, right? And it's supposed to be when we have all this, just celebration, and it is considered a holy convocation. And it says here, this is a statute forever in your dwellings throughout your generations.
Right.
So the fact is that it's a very important holiday, and like you said earlier, it's also the day that the Holy Spirit was poured out in Acts 2. So
that, to me, as a Jewish believing rabbi, that is also a Jewish holiday.
Right.
It's a new one.
But that's the funny thing is, that's the way God works. He uses his patterns and he keeps hitting them all the time to reinforce the fact that he wants you to pay attention to his appointed times. I mean, that's what Moedim means, right?
That's right.
So,
well, listen, have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us. If you have a question, please write it in, info@tlvbiblesociety.org.
Yeah, and go check out that calendar. I think you guys will really like it. It's just a download off our website. But thank you for joining us for TLV Talk. I hope you have a great day, and shalom, shalom.
Shalom.